All right, we're going to start in now. We'll go through introductions, a couple of housekeeping items, and you'll see there'll be a couple more people joining along the way, but they won't miss out on anything. So good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. We got a very exciting 90 minutes here where we're going to be walking through how to implement Alignment Planner Workspace, one of our new products that we're putting a lot of. Plays a big focus for our product strategy going forward. And we'll get into that more as we go through this presentation and workshop. Okay, there's a couple of housekeeping items I just wanted to make you aware of. We're going to keep everybody on mute. If you have questions, join the workshop. Please feel free to put your questions inside of chat. We have folks, besides the presenter, Scott, we have other folks from the team that are going to be answering your questions in chat, so we can get a discussion going there. But being mindful of time, we want to be able to keep the session going. It will be recorded, and you'll be able to get access to this on the ServiceNow community after the session, along with the toolkit that'll be available for you. And Scott's going to talk about the toolkit more as we go through this session, right? And then please, there'll be a quick survey at the end. Please fill it out. We really appreciate your feedbacks. This way we can ensure that we're providing you with the best content, and that we can improve on these based on your feedback as we continue these sessions going forward. So primarily we're going to be talking about features and functionality that are currently available. We are going to make reference to some of the product features, functionality that we have on our roadmap. To the best of our knowledge right now, we plan on delivering these features and functionalities. But however, as business circumstances can change for some variations to that. Okay, so I'm Tony Panaleo. I'm the director for the product success team, products for SPM. And the way we define product success is that our responsibility is working with our key customers and helping the product team, helping customers be able to drive adoption of our products across our customer base. It's a small team of highly skilled professionals that we have, all practitioners that come from the industry, right? The main focus today is going to be Scott Wallace, Principal Product Success Manager. Scott has 20 plus years of knowledge, not only within the PPM space, but a long history of within ServiceNow. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Tony. 20 years, wow, my photo there, I probably should have gone back a few more years, huh? So thank you, Tony, this great introduction. Hello, everybody, welcome. I'm excited to give an opportunity to take you through how to implement Alignment Planner Workspace. So with that, let's get started and do a quick outline of the agenda, right? So introductions were done. We'll do a quick poll to take a pulse of where you are. We'll talk about the value drivers of APW. Then we'll get into the Alignment Planner key concepts, the workspace itself, key concepts and navigation. And we'll do a demonstration of APW. We'll share a store release 4.1. What preparations are required for you to get started fast, right? My intention here is to show how you can get moving with APW quickly. Then we'll share some best practices and next steps, some information there on how to get started, some guides. And actually, there is a number 8 in here. There's something we'll show you at the end that doesn't show up exactly on the agenda, so that'll be interesting. So quick challenge. My challenge to you and my challenge to myself for this conversation here today really is, when I'm finished, right? We're finished with this session, you should be able to understand how to start your path, right? How to start your path in APW, because, right, you understand the capabilities of APW, you understand what's required to deploy APW, and also what's important is how to articulate to your business community the value of APW. Because it's kind of 3 steps: understand what it is, understand what's required to get started, and then also how do you communicate and engage your community. So that's my goal today, and we'll kind of check in at the very end to see that we've done that. So with that, let's kick off our first poll. And the poll really is your digital transformation. How do you see your digital transformation? Like we haven't started, we're moving slow, we're doing great, or great results and we're done. Good results coming in. I think you can get in the poll now. That's probably pretty good. So I find it interesting that if you look at the results here, say 41 and 35%, right? A few have not really started, right? So that's not unexpected. A few are progressing very fast. So there's some very probably mature, a couple of mature. But right in the middle, I would say, is the base. Going slow is probably interesting because it is a lot of work. It is a transformation. It's not something that's simple to do. It's a lot involved. I'm very pleased to see that there's a good chunk that are progressing well, because APW is going to help you do both of those right in the middle there, right? So help getting you started, and if you're progressing, help you progress faster. So let's go to the next poll. The question is your planning process. Is it somewhat automated, not automated, fully automated, or is it manual? Good participation here. I like this. This is great. Okay, that's probably pretty good. We can end it here. So first thing that I noticed is interesting. There's quite a few people say that your planning process is pretty manual. So you're in the right spot. You're in the right session to learn about how Alignment Planner Workspace can help you with that, get you out of the manual, all right? A little bit of manual, we're seeing, what I didn't see is no one really is kind of in a streamlined process, right? And that's really, I think, the end result of a lot of the digital transformation is being even an automated process, right? But you're in the right spot if you want to figure out how to take a completely manual process, or if you're moving kind of slowly, how to speed up that process. So very good results, interesting. And the next poll really is, is your planning aligned to company goals? Because part of the APW is taking the planning process and do alignment to the company strategy. All right, that's good results too. Thank you everybody who participated in the polls here. So interesting results here too. So APW takes your planning items, your planning information, and you take that information on APW and you can align it to your company goals. And that's one of the key drivers is work aligned to business strategy. It's the kind of top connected to the bottom and bottom connected to the top, right? So interesting to see here. There's a few companies that have, or a few, companies, organizations, right, that have a little bit of work or not linked, right? I see one that's no link, not even using goals, but not really linked. So there's an opportunity for you in APW here, the 15 of you who said, hey, we're not linked yet. So you'll see how that can be linked. And some of you have it already linked, but you're not using targets in APW. In the new goals framework, we have targets. And so congratulations to the group also that completed all work. That's pretty cool. All right, we can close down the poll and we can move on to the next session here, right? The next component. So here, I think I can close that poll down. Okay. So let's look at the overview of the value drivers, right? We'll get into some detail about that. Look at what drives the value of APW. What does it mean for us when we're driving the roadmap for this? But first, what I do want to call out is if you look at the store releases right now, APW is on 5.0. This session today, we're speaking to 4.1.1, which is supported in Tokyo and San Diego. And so meaning that Tokyo's out recently, I would assume that a lot of your customers are probably in San Diego. And so if you're on San Diego, you can take advantage of this immediately. It's not required that you take advantage of it in Tokyo. If you go to Tokyo and you're on Tokyo only, that's when you get 5, right? But again, 4.1 is supported in both. So as we go through the agenda here, let's step right in we ask some questions about your digital transformation, right? And that transformation, as you see here, is a journey, right? To get to that transformation, optimized and transformation, but it involves a cycle where you innovate, ideate, and you build and you run. It's kind of a cycle. And so then the question is, where does APW sit in this cycle? Like where do we fit? Well, APW fits in what they call in this full run cycle in planning, right? We're about APW is all about really planning for the enterprise. So you look at this planning cycle, right? Plan, build, operate, service, the whole kind of cycle here, right? APW sits in the planning cycle. And this is what I'm drawing your attention to is this cycle and the plan cycle is where APW fits. How do you plan for the enterprise? It supports strategic planning. And this is part of the value cycle, right? So APW will help you plan the business outcomes for all of your work. Okay, so what's driving market trends, right? Important trends that are driving the development of SPM, APW, what are they? One is supporting the alignment of work to business strategy. That's a major component. That's the top piece, right? We're enabling the flexibility of planning architecture that's flexible enough. You can support your transformation by moving to a kind of a product-centric portfolio management. It enables this journey to continue. That's the middle layer here. We're also simplifying the user experience to drive adoption. And you'll notice that comes from a lot of the new UIs and workspaces. So that's where we're making major investments in this application and all the connecting components to this application to drive this strategy. So then you ask the question, how do you connect your business strategy to prioritize critical work to deliver business value faster, right? What does that look like? So you have strategy, alignment, delivery. We just saw that kind of framework there. So the first piece is plan, right? So utilizing goals, strategic priorities, roadmap planning, APW links these together. The second component is alignment, right? This helps executives deliver outcomes by aligning and tracking investments across their portfolios. And the third is on deliver, right? So no matter what tool you use for delivering your work, at the execution layer, whether it's agile or safe or waterfall or a combination thereof, we've got you covered, right? So APW provides this visibility across the strategic planning, execution of work, your business priorities, your portfolio roadmaps, and it connects the enterprise and business unit goals. So this is a kind of a top-level map of capabilities. This will be available. There's actually a full deck on this. You can drill into each one of these squares. But where does APW fit in this world of all these capabilities in SPM? Well, the first piece, it sits up on the upper left here, right? So goals, portfolio prioritization, and road mapping. But APW uses information in other parts of SPM. It uses, in the agile side of the world, it uses the epics, right? So whether you're running safe or agile, and it's going to be pulling information in from projects and demands, okay? So APW uses information in the rest of SPM to run and do your planning. And this is more a little the forward-looking statement Tony made reference to. APW in the future will have capabilities for around scenario planning. We'll have some investment funding in there. We'll have kind of a voice of customer around innovation. That will be included in there. So there'll be some other things included in here, kind of forward-looking, all right? Again, the value drivers, right? The value drivers are visibility. So you get to see alignment of the work, the execution of that work. You get to understand a prioritization of the work. You'll see how we do prioritization within APW, how that works, right? And make sure you're looking top down at your investments, right? What investments are we making? And is the work that we're actually executing on the right work? So really think about the objectives. What are the core objectives of APW, right? Focus on delivering your outcomes, planning and tracking that work, making sure that what you plan can actually be delivered. Give your team clear expectations on what's being executed, right? There's a connection between APW and the execution work, and there's a communication cycle. And again, make sure your work's aligned to strategy. And of course, providing insights, right? Decisions, insights. There's a lot of contextual information available in APW that helps you understand what you're looking at and how to use the application. So let's get into some key concepts on APW and then some navigation. So the first thing I want to mention is just at the very top, these key concepts. It's more about terminology. What are these things? So when you think about, I want to call your attention to some key ones, the planning hierarchy and the planning organization. So think about the planning hierarchy as we need to set that up as part of this architecture. And that's how we want to plan. Are we going to do hybrid planning? Are we going to do waterfall planning, a combination, agile only planning? What type of planning are we going to do? And we provide templates for that. And then the next question is going to be, who am I planning for? Right? So it's looking at how I'm going to plan and who I'm going to plan for. These terms are part of the workshop. They'll be available in the reference kit, right? But I wanted to call out the key one around portfolio. I also want to draw your attention to the upper left, the term portfolio. If you're running, of course, most of you are probably running PPM today. You're familiar with portfolio in PPM, a very common term, right? There's also a portfolio concept in APW. And it's really a grouping, right? It's a grouping of planning items. And these planning items are represented by the execution items, say demand or project or epics. So portfolio has a little bit different connotation, right, in understanding. So when I use the term portfolio, it's really a collection of work, right? But there's other terminology. There's goals. We'll talk about goals and backlogs and roadmaps, okay? Personas, key one, to understand who your users will be of this application. So, these roles are set up. There's roles that come with the application. When you do the install, all that information is available in the starter kit. And as you can see here, we support personas from the executive to the product owner to the project owner, whether it's project being an epic or a product, right, or a project, to administration, right? So we really support the executive alignment of roadmap to business strategy. We support the product owner alignment to organization goals. We support the product owners who manage the work items. And of course, there's an administration role for setup and managing the application. So all these roles we build for these personas. They're also included in the setup. All right, so thinking about guided setup. So what does it take to turn on APW, right? So this is what I want to communicate, that it's not that difficult. And I really believe that, honestly, it's not that difficult. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of customers could take advantage of APW much faster than they think they might be able to. So there is a guided setup for you, all right? And the guided setup takes you through a set of steps to set up a planning hierarchy, planning organization, users and roles as kind of an admin function, right? So the planning hierarchy, we provide templates for that. They'll, in the Getting Started kit, there's an entire set of workshop material that you can use and documentation about, okay, so we need to figure out what our planning hierarchy is. How do we do that? Interview users, talk to business community, study up the organization, who are you doing it for? Users and roles for admin, right? You figure that out. And then you'll get to a point that you'll begin to bring in information in the planning item tables, right? This is a kind of it is integration that happens, and you get to work with the information that comes from these execution records. You want to validate. So these kind of 5 major steps. Depending on if you want to use goals, there's more steps, right? Again, these are all available in guided setup. So you can use goals, right? You might want to extend your nodes out, different planning nodes, right? And depending on how you're doing Agile, how you're bringing in Agile information. There's additional integrations beyond what's set up here, bring in information from Agile or Safe. You may have, say, Jira running or ADO running, and we can support that too. So the guided setup should really be a key component for you. It tells you what you need to do step by step. All right. So let's now get into quickly. This is a visual of the integrations. So you think about Alignment Planner as this thing sitting up top, this workspace sitting up top, but uses information that sits in the rest of SPM. So it's going to be using demands and projects and epics, right? So you think about this integration, what it does is APW sitting at the top there. It's an example of the roadmap. And then sitting in the blue, I've got the demand dashboard and I have a project workspace. Sitting down below that, I think this is Scrum programs, right? So it's using that information to pull at the top. And it's again, automated integration in the back end. It's an internal integration is what it is, right? And you'll set that up, and you look at the records that come in. That's how it feeds this APW system, the application. So let's next get on to the architecture. Okay, when we say about the architecture, this is really about the planning hierarchy and the organizational hierarchies. So this is part of a setup you'll need to determine of how you want to plan and then who's planning. Okay, so you want to understand the structure. Are we doing hybrid? And again, it's a flexible planning hierarchy. It allows you to structure your planning to meet your business goals, right? And it's used to collect the organization hierarchy is used to collect the data needed to establish the information so you can actually plan. And what is important to note is the flexibility to establish an architecture, planning architecture, using your organization to match your strategic requirements, right? So it's flexible enough. You can meet your requirements, how you want to plan, who you want to plan for. We also, by the way, provide several planning hierarchy templates that make the setup of the integration on the back end much easier. You don't have to construct it yourself. It's an internal integration we provide templates for. So there's a guided setup that'll guide you through that. Here's an example of an architecture. We're saying, hey, we're going to, at the initiative level, the enterprise level, we're going to set up some initiatives. Below that, we're going to have a construct called a portfolio. In the portfolio, we're going to be bringing information from demand, project, and epic, right? So that's as a structure. The actual demonstration today, I will use that structure. I will demo portfolio, demand, project, and epic, right? And this is a construct we have. By the way, if you load in demo data, if you had set up an instance, your own personal instance, or if you activate and load in a subdev, and you activate demo data, a lot of this you'll recognize as the same demo data. So you could actually set up an instance pretty quick and play around with it before you say I want to take all my existing company data. You could run it this way to test it out. So the next concept here I want to talk about is the planning state, right? So as data in the form of planning items is collected in the backlog and as part of the APW internal integration, there are record states that impact what you see and how you use the information. Because we're bringing in a lot of information on these execution records. And the information you bring in is around backlog, right? So this stuff all shows up in the backlog in APW. So we're pulling a bunch of information. It becomes part of the backlog in the term of a planning item. And in that planning item, for stuff to show up in the planning item, you need a roadmap. So effectively what happens is everything sits in the backlog. And when you set it to prioritization, and you see the green checkbox there, right? Only the items that are in the prioritized state show up in your roadmap. Otherwise, you can imagine you can have a roadmap full of just, endless stuff and it'd be hard to manage. So the purpose is to say, I've got a lot of information. It's like Agile. Think the Agile concepts, right? Same purpose. You're managing the backlogs, you're prioritizing, you're ranking, you're stacking and ranking, making sure things are ready. Same concept here, right? You're putting things in a prioritized state. And that's an important thing to know. Right? So let's go on to some navigation. What are we looking at when we're looking at APW as a navigation, right? So when you're looking at navigation, I'm seeing the full picture here of 4.1. You've got a nav on the side on the left, right? So this is where you work within the framework of moving things around and prioritizing work, right? You have the ability to do dependencies and connect things together. right? And you connect things to the goal framework. So this is like a high level. This is a very high level. This is the broad picture, right? So let's get into some more details of what this looks like. So for those of you who are not familiar with the new workspaces, navigation to the workspace, you'll see on the top bar here in the red, I highlighted in there for you because you can move between workspaces, right? Which is really nice. You can actually move around and navigate. Instead of having to go to menus and jump around for menus, you can say, hey, I want to go work in the APW workspace. Wait, I want to go work in a project, the new project workspace, or maybe, you know, an ITSM work or ITOM workspace. So you can move around workspaces pretty fast, which is really nice. So over here on the far left is where you determine what roadmap you're working with. Am I planning in my planning hierarchies, or am I doing ad hoc, right? The next piece is you're going to pick your organization, right? Am I picking a portfolio? Am I picking the enterprise? Like, what organization am I picking? And then, you know, the organization name. And this is an example. We're picking HR. We're going to kind of stick in the HR framework for the demonstration here, right? So these are the actual core menus. I'm on roadmap here, so you're seeing the roadmap in the view. If you go to backlog or goals, you'll see that in the menu. So when you look at the roadmap itself, how do I construct it? You're looking at the core of what's been brought in because it's been prioritized. You're also looking at the dates at the top. See the dates here, I have 2021, January 1. So I'm giving my roadmap a framework to work from. So you may have stuff that dates back a ways, goes forward a ways. This gives you the flexibility to say, hey, you want to plan within a 6-month window or a 24-month window. You decide, right? Next one here is milestones. You can have milestones at the roadmap level and also at the execution level, the bars, right? The bars represent the execution items, the planning items effectively, right? So you can set milestones. Hey, we've got a launch date, an important event happening, something critical that everything needs to line up to. So you can have milestones. Really, it's kind of neat. You can have both, right? And then you'll have your personalization. That's one thing I think is really fantastic about APW. There's a lot of personalization. You can tailor this to fit how you want to work, you as an individual, right? It's not like configuration. You can personalize this to act and operate the way you want. Next one is execution items. I mentioned that these are the bars, and they're highlighted here because they're colored and grouped by. So you'll know what different colors mean different things. There's also a track mode. So track mode allows you to see information within the bars of progress, right? So let's get into the personalized navigation side, right? So a really important one is right now I have things grouped by primary goal. So you see on the left, it says primary goal, and you'll see under group by, it says primary goal. You can group by 3. So you could expand and say group by, say priority or something, right? So you can group by different characteristics. You can also bring in your own characteristics, which I've seen most customers do that, where they say, hey, I have some unique things that some attributes that belong to my business. You put them in integrations, you bring them in, you group by. You also have color by, right? So group by and color by gives you context of what you're working with. In the bars, you can say, what do I want in the bars? What information do I want in the bars? See in the bars, right? So you can click, as it's off right now, I'm not seeing. If I click it, it'll come on, right? We talked about the milestones, right? You can see the milestones. You can create milestones and move milestones. This is drag and drop capability. Item milestones, right? You can bring in, if you have an execution item that brings in a milestone, you'll see that. You can also add a milestone to the execution item. Now, if you add in the APW, it doesn't automatically roll back to the execution item. Just to let you know that if you set milestones and so forth, they stay within APW, but you'll bring in milestones from an execution item. Another big important one is dependencies, right? What things are connected together. And this is really important to say, I have things dependent on each other. Do I have conflicts? And we'll see how to resolve a conflict during the demo. And there's also a legend here at the bottom, right? Which tells you, what colors mean different things. You can turn dependencies, visualization, I don't know, okay? So let's go to the next one, the actual track mode. So when you click track mode on, you'll start to see like example, and you can set what you want to see in the track mode, like percent complete. You'll set, I think you're in the bar, like you set, what do I want in it? What do I want? This is again, back to the personalization and visualization. You'll see status, if you're bringing in kind of a status, red, green, yellow. And here is an example on my bar. I said, hey, bring in, I think it was total cost. So I'm seeing total cost on the bar for, say, for this project as an example. So navigation and goals, same thing. Like you can right from here, you can create a new goal. You can have existing goals. You can look at targets or say, hey, I've got a new goal. So create a new goal for the organization. Then you jump to targets. Like this is where you look at the progress against your goal, right? So you can put in actuals that show you progress. Right? And again, personalization. What do I want in these columns? What do I want to see in these columns? Status, right? So this is all good shape. So my progress is meeting against my objectives. So I'm all green. And you'll see at the top two, Acme Inc. is the parent of this portfolio. So this stuff rolls up. So all this has roll-up capability. So if you're running at the higher level initiatives, you have lots of portfolios that represent Acme, and Acme has a top level, right? And from this menu on each one of these goals, you can create from here a sub goal, a new target. You can align work to this particular goal, and you can also delete it, of course, right? If you have the right rights to delete. Okay, so that's the goals. And in the backlog, right? The main one on the backlog. So the important thing to know the backlog, this is a backlog. You'll see this is all the planning items, right? So you'll see them represented here. I have them grouped by the status that they're in, the pending status, reviewed status, right? That's how you see here. So you can drag and drop at the top menu there to kind of group things and work in a grouped fashion. So you'll look here at the prioritize. We mentioned this earlier, but prioritization is what shows in the roadmap. But you may have lots of things that are in review state or new that just came in as a result of integration running and pulls of information in. You haven't really spent time looking at yet, or maybe it's being considered. And this is where you do your stack ranking, right? This is kind of where you start to move things up and down where you think they might fall next into the roadmap. All of the dates come in. So you've got this concept called approved dates. And that's an important thing to note, that there's a set of dates. There's dates that come in from the execution items, and there's dates that sit in the planning items. And there'll be notes, there'll be, as an example, like you're looking at demand, you'll see the approved dates, approved and end. That information will be given back to the demand manager or project manager or Epic, right? To say, here's what the planning organization sees the dates as. You obviously, as the owner of the execution item, have your own dates. And it'll notify you and give you information that says, hey, there's an alignment issue. And we'll see an example of a demo when I go through it. You'll see how you can correct the alignment. But it's not automatic that you move a date here and planning it automatically moves your execution items, because that'd be kind of chaos. So goal relationships too, as an example here, you would want to make sure that things are aligned to goals. If you're doing work that's not aligned, the major question, how come it's not aligned? Why are we doing it? So that's another reason why this is shown here, is you can drag and drop and add your goals to what needs to be identified to do alignment, right? You can ranking, you can reorder based on how you want to manage and stack rank and reorder. And again, you can actually right from here, you can create a new planning item. So depending on your workflow and your business process, maybe you don't want that, but you actually can create a new item, and that's where new would come in, and it would just show up in your backlog. So there's a way to work just from this workspace if you choose to have that from a business process flow for yourself, right? And you can also navigate to, on the far left over there, the circle. This is the ad hoc roadmap. This is a roadmap where you can construct kind of a free-form roadmap. Say, for instance, I'm going to look across all portfolios for a particular business unit. So I select the business unit, and I select the portfolio. This is an example, when you go through, when I click through here, this is where you personalize and you say, hey, I'd have a filter. This is what I'm looking for. This is an example. My example here is I'm going to look at any projects related to HR that haven't started yet. So I'm looking at projects that are probably in the pending and open state. They belong to this portfolio. This is an example of saying, I want a ad hoc roadmap that gives me work that isn't planned yet. Like it's going to be planned. It's in. So I'm querying all the information sitting over in the execution record, right? That's effectively what I'm doing here. And this is what my visualization will look like. And I'm broken them down grouped by the type of work. So agile, hybrid, waterfall work. And these are the actual visualizations of here's the work that's being scheduled, right? So it's kind of like looking and saying, so again, it's ad hoc. You can kind of create these things as needed, right? So let's do a time check here. think I'm a little ahead of schedule, which is good. So let's go into some demonstrations here. These demonstrations I constructed. Each one of them, I think there's 12 total videos, and they each have a use case behind them. We'll talk about, and I'll step through the video and I'll make comments on the video. And these videos will all be available as part of the Getting Started Kit also, right? So since I'm a little ahead of schedule, before I jump into demos, I just asked the moderators if there's any questions I could answer right now before I step into demonstrations.
Hey, Scott, here's one.
Yeah.
Is one challenge we have met is how to prioritize work for projects. We have 10 projects. How do you determine what projects you work on and in that order?
Well, first question is it alignment to a business goal, business strategy, right?
Right.
So prioritization is the first key thing, and you can do that in APW, which is, okay, I have those 10 projects. I put them into prioritized mode, right? So they show up in a roadmap. Are they linked to objectives and goals? Actually, you could do that technically right in the backlog. You could work in the backlog and say, hey, here's 10 projects. I've linked 5 to company goals. I've got 5 that are not. You could stack rank those right off the bat. First thing you could do. You could also look, and as soon as you do that, you move into prioritization state. When you move prioritization state to show up in the roadmap, when they're on a roadmap, you can start to look at dependencies between them. So you see them visually like a Gantt. You can start to see where they stop and end and where you've got conflicts and so forth. That might help you reprioritize things based on the schedule. Good. All right.
Very good. Thanks, Scott.
Yep. So let's go into the demonstration here. Yes.
There was one more question about team space and having issues utilizing APW.
Yeah, so APW is going to be looking at the core table, and there probably would be some required specific configurations you'd need to look at in building into APW as part of an integration. That's something actually we're building a best practice on as we speak. To accommodate the team space in these new workspaces. Because right now, by default, APW is going to go look at core. So it's going to look at PM project, DM demand, Agile, right? So Scrum. So it has to be configuration, say, hey, I need to look at a team space 1 or team space 2 or whatever team spaces you're going to need. So yeah, that's the best practice we're working on, and we should have some more information out shortly of our recommendation how to accommodate that.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a set of demonstrations here. I'm going to go through setups, kind of a planning architecture. We'll go through some workspaces, backlog, and then goals. All right. So the first one here is the plugin. So when you run the plugin, you'll go to ServiceNow Store and you'll just search for Alignment Planner. And note, when it brings it up here, you'll see this little comment. When you do the search, you'll see a comment called in product, which means it's embedded within the actual, it's not just a standalone app, it's embedded in the, like this is an example of the goals framework is in Tokyo. So you click on this, what you'll see is you can request the install here, depending on your licensing, right? I've already requested for my demo, but I want to note here that when you see it, you'll see the release levels and the information will be available in the release levels, right? So I'm requesting 4.1, and this is where you go to view details. And since I've already requested it, it already says I've already requested it. You can see information. You can see how to get to it. Once you requested it, you'll get an email. Admin will get an email. It says your request. Here it is. And this is where you'll go into that instance you have, and you'll search under apps. Right. This is an admin function here. You'll search for that Alignment Planner. Right. And you'll see Alignment Planner, and you'll see I've already, of course, installed 4.1 here. And this is where you'll go in and you'll see the install. And this is where you can do the install, or if you had an issue with it, repair the install or whatever. And this is the admin function of, and looking at all the details that sit within the install and the install logs and so forth, right? So if the admin's familiar with installing any other store apps, this is a pretty common set of steps, right? So the next one is the guided setup. And we talked about guided setup and all the steps. So let's go look what guided setup looks like, right? So first thing we'll do is go over and do alignment. So search on Alignment Planner and Alignment Planner guided setup. and you'll see all the steps. And so we see hierarchy. This is kind of setting up the planning templates. You're going to set up the organization, planning organization. You're going to select the planning items to check out the quality of your data, right? If you have extended nodes. Now, again, we're done with step 5, right? So these other things are kind of optional, depending on how your structure is and what you need to do. Any one of these, if you click into it, you get into a set of steps. And the steps will take you right to the configuration. And then you can do the configuration, you can come back to the guided setup and hit complete, right? So depending if you want to use guided setup, or if you just want to go direct to the application, you can also do that too, right? So here's like getting started, and I go over and I say, hey, I want to configure the planning hierarchy. It takes me right to the planning hierarchy. The guided setup will take you right to where you need to be. You can create your own. I recommend you use the related links because they're templates. So here's an example of using a hybrid template. And you say, hey, I have a new planning hierarchy using a guided template. It's hybrid here. You'll see that I bring in Demand Project and Epic, right? So it's an example of, hey, I want to run, and you'll save this as a planning hierarchy. And you'll see we automatically set up the relationships, right? Set the relationships between the planning organization, the parent, and the planning items. So we're connecting APW to the planning items, right? And when you're done with that, you can go back and look at these different organizations. You can see which ones are set up. You can, again, if you're using your guided setup, you can go back and say complete, right? Yep, say complete. So this is, all these steps are common like this when you go through the guided setup, right? So next one we'll do is roles. So when you set up roles, there's a defined set of roles out of the box. They come as you do the install. So you can go, this again, but somewhat of an admin function, right? You go to groups and you say, hey, there's already groups established for you, admin and user. And what I'm doing here is, again, traditional admin function, but I need to say, what group do I want to add to this? And you want to search under SN alignment, right? There's sets of roles already defined here. You'll add these roles. If you want, you can add members specifically that don't come as a result of a group. So you may give this just to specific people. You can do that too. I'm going to add a user here, Megan Burke, who's the representative of the portfolio organization. And a little trick I added here too, if you wanted to, I added skills. I created a skills group called APW and so if you're doing some kind of training and the person has to be qualified to use the application, you could use skills here. So I just wanted to point that out, that we have the capability and skills and resource where you could construct something like that to say, hey, you need to be, proficient and trained in APW, right? And here's where I'm going to do the persona. I'm going to go log in as Megan, and I'm going to make sure that as Megan, I get to see APW. So Megan goes and she types in alignment. Now she goes right to the workspace, and there's a workspace alignment planner right there. Right. So Megan's happy. Megan's a user. Megan sees information, right? Again, depending on what she checks for your type and your company. Right? So there's the role side, how to set up roles. Next one is running integrations. And these integrations, what you want to understand is it's moving data from your planning, your execution items, demand project epics, if you pick hybrid. And there's an integration that runs in the back end. And that's part of the setup here, right? So we set this up, we picked hybrid, and now this integration's never been run before because there's no information in it. So we're going to run the integration, and you'll see it'll run and it'll create some integration scripts. These integration scripts will run. I do an import here, right? And it'll run. And I got to pick my date. Make sure you note an important note I want to make sure you mention it, is when you pick this time frame, your execution records that it's looking at is the created date of your record. So if you have a bunch of very old projects for some reason that date back to 2018, but they're still being active, you got to make sure you have a broad date range to bring them in. So created date is an important kind of lesson learned for you. So here's integration. Integration is running, right? Again, if you update APW on the alignment planner, it goes back and updates the existing execution records, but I'm bringing in new records. Here's what I'm doing. You can set this up as a job, but I want to bring in my first set of records, right? So the execution is done, and you get to look at all the imports, right? I probably had some errors, probably some milestones, a few things there, but you can look at the integrations. That's again an admin function, but you want to make sure the integrations are running and the information you're bringing in, especially as an example, if you want to bring in your own, say, custom fields. Like I want to bring in a custom field to group by or filter by or group by something unique to your business. You want to make sure you add that to the integration, right? So let's now move on to Alignment Planner. Again, you're seeing a visualization here of a deliverable that sits in the Getting Started Kit, which is a workshop. It's a very extensive 112 slide workshop that anyone can take and set up a workshop with your users to figure out how we're going to implement Alignment Planner. So we give you basically the starter kit. Here it is right there, Alignment Planner, right? We give you this starter kit as an example. We also give you, we also give you information on how to build out your hierarchies, right? So let's go look at the actual demo of how to do that, right? So creating a planning hierarchy, right? You go to guided setup, you go to the planning hierarchy, right? We've probably gone through a little of this already, but how you do this setup, right? You use a guided setup. You want to pick hybrid, right? And we're going to go create, we're going to use a reference. I'm going to use the demo data, and this is why I set this up like this, right? We're using hybrid. Right. And I want to make note that as you set this up and you save this, there's always collaboration capabilities that you can use. And I pick Scrum, right? That's the model I want to use, right? So it determines this in advance, what you need, right? And it's my hierarchy. And again, you can set these hierarchies up based on how you want to do your planning, right? So I go to the planning hierarchies, a guided setup. This way I could go to planning hierarchies direct if I had been permissions. Right. So again, you see on here on this page, we have hierarchies provided for PPM, hybrid, and safe, agile only kind of model, right? Most customers we've seen are picking hybrid because they have some level of agile going on, and they have maybe epics or something like that, right? All right. Let's next to create the planning organization. So go up to Alignment Planner, get your planning organization, right? And there's many of these, and these will be constructed based on how you want to do your planning. I'm going to do a planning organization. I want to plan by portfolio, and I'll name my portfolio, right? And I do this as a quick demonstration, and we'll go back and reference this, but I want to set it up for this organization. Since I know how I'm going to plan, now I'm setting it up for who, like who's going to be doing this planning, right? I'm going to do hybrid planning. There's no parent to this, right? I'm going to pick Megan as the owner of this organization. So Megan's responsible. That's a key one to make sure you pick the right person. Security and the roles will look for the owner. I'll make sure that every planning organization has an owner, and define what it is, what it's for, how it's being used. Right? So now pick as an example here, I think I go and pick my hybrid. And I want to show you that you can see how it's set up, who the owner is. There might be some collaboration activities going on about what the organization is, like who owns the organization and what they're doing. So that's in work notes and so forth, right? Right. Again, if you're done in guided setup, you go back to guided setup, and you'll say, hey, this piece is complete. Right. So let's look at roadmap preferences, right? So what's roadmap preferences? Roadmap preferences are, the simplest way to say that is it's the information that gets carried across an integration and what's in the integration. So my example here, I'm going to give you, this is looking at what I'm bringing in from demand as out of the box. It brings in what group by, color by. What if an example, I want to group by location? It's not default there. Well, as a setup function, you can go in and say, hey, I want to add a new one called location. So I could say, okay, I want to add location to my integration, and I need to bring it in and what I'm going to use it for, right? And I think on demand, I have an example here. I bring it in by, make sure you, by the way, keynote here, make sure you're in the right update set, because the update sets, there's 3 different types of update sets, because there's global, there's app, and there's core. Make sure you're in the right one. Here's an example. I'm bringing in location, right? So I'm bringing in location for demand. Like I want demand location. If you're using that in demand as an example, right? So make sure you bring in the right information that's available on the record itself. So that's kind of the preference. It's like what you're bringing in. Right? Go back to guided setup and set complete. All right, so let's go to the next one, and we'll do the planning items and look at planning items. And remember, planning items are the items that we brought in from the execution, right? The execution records. Effectively, the execution records become the planning items, and they have all the APW data around them, right? So APW has all sorts of relationships to this information, including the planning organizations, the dates, ownership, a whole bunch of information. This is how when you get in APW and you look at full details, you've got all the information that comes right from the record. So it's really effectively integrating a bunch of information and adding information. And this is what you'll want to spend a lot of time in, making sure that the information comes in, it's correctly identified in your backlog, and the planning item table is where all this stuff is maintained. So as a user, you'll spend your time in the backlog. Admin will be looking at the planning item tables if you have any issues or stuff that doesn't show up, or right. Okay, next let's go to nav personalization. Oops, sorry, back up here. So in the navigation, right? So we talked about how to pick a portfolio. You can collapse to get more real estate, right? The collapse button, how you pick your portfolio, what type of portfolio, enterprise, domain, you pick your organization. So effectively, who am I planning for? What type of planning am I doing? I'm in a roadmap now, I collapse it, right? Each of these are execution items. This is where you pick your date range of the map of your Gantt, right? What I'm looking at, the range I want to look at. There's a track mode. If I turn track mode on, you'll see the information show up, right? All the information shows up. I have, status and dollars in here and percent complete, right? As we move across, this is just more admin function. This talks about the HR, SPM portfolio, the planning organization information if you're the owner. Again, we saw this collaboration earlier. I had a picture in there and I'm collaborating with the owner. Right. Here's where you want to look at the month, quarter, year, depending on what your range is, how broadly you plan. It may be sense to plan in quarters or months, or you probably want to plan in months if you're doing 2 years, kind of lots of movement. Right. Here's personalization. This is where you can say, hey, I'm doing primary goal, right? I'm going to group by primary goal. And you can add, say, I want to group by primary goal, and here I'm going to do priority. So I want to see primary goal and priority, boom, we bring in priority. Now I'm looking at primary goal by priority. And I think there's 3 levels you can add. And you can do the color by too, right? So here's colored by, my owner is colored by item type. I can bring in who the owner is if you want to communicate and chat with the owner. Right? And as you go down into milestones, right? You can have milestones on or off. You also have the ability to do a milestone only map, which sometimes is interesting. Again, these are individual milestones and top level milestones. Individual, if you go to here, this is the milestone of just milestones. So some people just want to work in the milestone world. And now you can do that. View dependencies is important too here, right? So dependencies, where they are, you want to see them, you want to visually see the dependencies. Right? Right, so that's just kind of general navigation here. Here's where you click in, you look at the individual item. I clicked in the item and I can look at details, I can look at milestones. This is like looking at the individual record. I can look at dependencies and comments and attachments. It's kind of looking at the item itself. Again, this is unscheduled items. I had created something right from this view unscheduled. And this is, again, more filtering. This is how you're understanding what's being brought in. And we're bringing anything that's, say for me, interest conversions like demands to project. You don't want to bring those in. You want to bring in demands or project. Right? It's a filtering process. Again, backlog prioritization. This is how you change. You can move things around, stack rank, change prioritization. Right? Again, the legend down here. Right? All right. So that's a little bit of navigation. Let's look at milestones. So in the milestones, again, as I mentioned, you'll have milestones that are at the roadmap level. You can drag and drop them. You can move them around. You click on them. You can open them up. You can delete them. You can create new ones. You just click on the top level, right, that bar right there. You can say create new. You can also create new from milestone from the UI nav. Here's an example. I want to create, there's a budget deadline. I want to create something on the budget deadline. It's upcoming, right? So this is like creating a new milestone for myself. Right from here, I can create a milestone. Right? So there's kind of several ways to create it, but here I'm linking in saying, hey, there's a new system launch coming. HR system launch is going to be, here's the key milestone date, system launch date. I picked my date. It's going to go, next week, a couple weeks from now, right? And it will show up in the future here, right? It's got a launch date. You can see it. Right? Again, as I mentioned, you can drag and drop these things around, right? Okay, that's milestones. Next, go to planning items, right? Milestone and planning items. So we'll go into the individual item here itself, and we'll look at, actually, I don't think, I missed that, there it is. So I want to give an example here in planning items. This use case example of where I've got something that's dependent. I've got a demand here in purple. I've got dependency to HRIS automation in front of it, and I need to align that better. So the question is, can I move this out and still maintain my red bar there on my launch date? In other words, can I compress this annual comp demand? Can this be compressed where I can stay in alignment with HRIS? Right? That's kind of a use case as an example of how a user might use this. So let's go do this demonstration here. So I look at the item, the planning item, right? And I see the planning item. I've got a conflict here, right? So I look at the HRIS, and so basically I need to find out, can I move this out? So I open up the record, I put on track mode to see, it looks like the HRIS is a little ahead of schedule. All right, so maybe I've got an opportunity to move this out. I've got a milestone that sits out in front a little ways against a launch. So the question is, can we do this? Right, there's my full launch date. Looks like it's still within the time frame. I've got some decisions around funding to make. Right. Looks like I have a little bit of bandwidth here to move this thing. So can I move this? So this is an example of me demonstrating collaboration with users. Right, so I look at dependencies. Right from this view, I can see milestones, dependencies, and here I want to go into collaboration because I want to talk to the people that own these records and say, can I do this? Right. So I go back to details. I see some dependencies here. I'm looking at the dependency. Right? Again, the details and the dependency here. So in details here is where I go in and I decide, can I talk to these people? I share some information. We talk back and forth. I talk to the product owner. I talk to the portfolio owner. Right, back and forth. Can we move this? So you can do all this right from APW, which is what's really terrific. You can kind of do this collaboration right here and get agreement. And I talked to the actual Brian Marshall, who's the demand manager owner, and I talked to him. And so I say, yeah. So it looks like Marshall's agreed. Yeah, he's going to move the date. So here, as a portfolio owner, I move the date. But remember, this is APW moving the date. This isn't moving the date in the demand. So I move the date and save it. So I move the demand on the planning item, right? There it goes up, still maintain my dependency. But what needs to happen is Brian Marshall needs to go into demand and see where, the portfolio managers made the change, right? You see the dependencies here. So I go in as in a minute here, we'll go over to demand manager as Brian, and Brian's going to see the conflict and say, okay, because he's already approved it, but it's now adjusting his demand. So I go to dates and you'll see there's a date of alignment, amount of alignment here. And this is where he would make his change on his primary record of due date. Actually start date, sorry. Now here we pick a start date according to what they agreed to, right? So he does his move. based on the agreement. Again, I wanted to point out this is not automatic because you don't want to have portfolio manager picking up and moving around. Again, in the future, we'll have some capabilities to do scenario planning where we can execute from this once the scenario is agreed to. Right. So there we are. We have the date changes. We have alignment done. We have communication back and forth. It's on the record of what the agreement was. Right. For sake of time, I'll move up here. All right, so let's move on to nav. Let's jump to the backlog. Right, so the backlog, you have the ability to rank. You'll see the ranking capabilities there, right? So you can move things around. You can drag and drop. Again, you see the states, prioritization state, new state, in review state. You know what the planning item is, epic project demand, right? Priority. You can change a priority here too, right? Alignment, right? Again, you can change the information in here, how you want to see your set, alignment set. Here, I'm going to grab something and move it up. All right, onboarding, I'm going to move up. So I might drag it up a bit, reprioritize it. Because right now it's still in the in-review state. Maybe I want to move it up because I want to consider it. So in review, right? You want to move that up a bit. Here's like the specific onboarding, I think is the example I took. And I say, hey, I want to move that up. This is the one it's an epic, it's high priority. So let's prioritize that and move it up. Right. In other words, then it would become part of, and here's an example of where I move and I say, hey, I want to look at prioritized items, like a different way of looking at the information. If you have a lot of information, it's a faster way of finding and moving stuff around and ranking stuff. And here in review, this is one where I find the HR one I found. I'll take the planning item because not only do I want to look at the planning state, but I want to look at the planning item, next column over. I'll drag that up. And now I'm looking at prioritization, right? And I'll look at prioritization. I'll look at the epic. Nothing I can move in demand. I'll look in epic, right? And the project. And here's the one. And I look at, go down a little bit. I'll resort my columns. Right. And as I work my way down, I'll see that epic. And I look at the in review state. Also demand, everything's in review, but I want to go to that epic. Right. So I'll go to epic, right? Project epic, right? So I'll bring up the epic and then there's the user review. You can see what's high priority. Right. So this is how you can kind of manage and work your way around the prioritization methods in the backlog. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the backlog to state change. This in the state change is where, start the video. This is where I'm going to look at state change. I'm going to pick something. I can determine where it is. I want to bring something in here. This is probably where I'm picking my HR. Well, actually, I think I've originally picked the HR one. We'll see. Want to bring something in there on the HR one. Right. We're picking the backlog. We're moving it. Looking at specific dates. Right. We'll look at the information. It looks like this particular epic meets the weighted characteristics. It's got a high weight. So that's important, right? All that stuff's important to know. Right. The sprint team, right? We need to find out what we can do in the backlog with this sprint team. Can they take this or not, right? So it looks like it's available. The sprint team looks like we can plan it. Right, so we're going to add, and there it is. There it shows up. See, we added it back now. This new sprint team, is connected. So the sprint team from HRIS can now move to the onboarding. That's an example of kind of your roadmap planning. Right? This is kind of the management of the backlog. All right. So we did that state change there. Next one is just set up goals. This is where you're going to want to go to the goals. Right. So here, right from this goal, I can do setup. I can add alignment of work. I can do deletes and set, et cetera. Right here, I want to set up a new goal. I want to create a new goal under Acme. Right, redesign training and education. I'll give it some parameters, some date parameters of the target or the goal itself. Right, and once I establish that as like an FY23, I give it that date range. Now here's an example. Once I take the goal, I'm going to set some targets against the goal. Right. So maybe it's deployment of new applications, new training applications as part of that goal. And I'll set the target. Maybe the target's a number versus a percent or dollars or whatever, right? So I set a number here. The number I want to have like maybe a couple of new apps put out, right? And I'll save that target. All right. And the next video, we'll see how to update that target. Right. So there's the goal. And alignment to work too. This is how you can do alignment to work. You can do it a couple different ways. You can do it on the actual roadmap. You can also go in the goals and say, hey, if these things align to the goals, this is connecting the goal to the execution item. Well, actually, the planning item, which is the execution item. All right, so the last demonstration here is update the actuals. So here you pick your goal. And then down below that, we mentioned that we're doing this education, right? So here's my target, deploy number of apps. Here's an example of over time. You might say, hey, first quarter, we achieved 2, right? So I might put in information, say, hey, we achieved 1, I think 1 or 2. And maybe you put in comments, hey, this is as of this point in time. And then you go back a little later and you update the goal again. And by the way, as a forward-looking, there are some new capabilities coming in the future where we're going to be able to automate a lot of this with information in the platform, which would be really cool. Instead of having to manually put this in, you can automate it. Right? So here's an example of like a little bit later. I said, hey, we achieved, 5. Right? And you'll see the percentages start to go. This is all automated. It rolls up. These percentages roll up. So we got the base targets, what the measure is. We look at our actuals. And of course, these things roll up and they actually roll up to the top level under Acme. And so as I expand these, you'll see all these targets against the goals and what the measures are and what the percentages are and how it rolls up to the Acme level. Right? And under Acme example, if I open up an Acme, I can actually see this top level goal, the enterprise level, right? You can look at the sub goals. So maybe you start at the enterprise and do sub goals versus say at a portfolio and doing a goal. Again, they're at 50, whatever it is, 50 some percent. All right. So that brings us to the end. I think we're right on time here. Well, few minutes off, but let's go into preparation. So key things to considerations and checklists for starting the launch and getting ready, right? So we mentioned about the Alignment Planner Workspace, right? This implementation guide. That's the number one thing. It's very detailed, a lot of information for you. We also have what they call a process guide. Again, these are available out in the Getting Started kit. And so the process guide has lots and lots of information. So there's a lot of detail for you on how to get started, right? But ultimately, really what you want to think about it is, so I need to do an install. There's 5 major steps. Install, I have to do some configuration, right? To get the integrations working, configuration, make sure I have the proper planning hierarchy and organization hierarchy set up. Right? You want to make sure that's done. And then you're going to want to review the information. It's critical that you review the data coming in, because the data coming in, your users are going to see, right, from the planning items. Make sure that information. You want to test it. I recommend you work with a smaller subset of test data first. Don't bring in everything from production. Make sure you bring in a small range. And then validate, right? Depending if you want to go further, you want to do, if you're running some integrations with ADO or Jira or something like that. And then, of course, at the bottom here, setting up goals. Right. So again, this is through the guided setup, right? And we mentioned what the guided setup is. You go through these steps. We've gone through this, and I've walked through this, and I've shown a demonstration, right? So a little bit of information, like the plugin, the plugin numbers here, where to find it, what it comes with as the store app. It also installs the goals framework, right? And this is interesting to note that when you do this, this is why you have different update sets, right? It installs different components, and those different components are managed with different update sets. But this is the one you would see for hybrid for Agile. This is the safe one. Right? So a little bit more information is being installed for safe, but you still have Alignment Planner, the goals framework, but it installs some safe framework information. Right? Here's information on the roles. We saw this earlier where we did a search for SN, assign, align, right, and SN core, right? So different roles. Again, as a user is going to see on the side over here in the top, and of course, admin is going to see the bottom box there with more information on integrations and so forth. Right? Again, as I mentioned, the update sets, right? There's a core, there's a workspace, and there's a planning. So just make sure when you do your work that you know here which update set you're in. Because sometimes you want to change something, you got to make sure you're in the right update set. Again, we walk through the planning hierarchies, right? So this is the core template. And this one here is just a waterfall. Of course, this template's going to say, hey, I just want to work with demands and projects to get started. Next one, you're going to work with the hybrid, right? So it's going to automatically say, hey, listen, I need to set up the integrations for epics. And of course, this is the one for the safe. Right? And we talked about the goals framework, right? What you need to build it, right? You need to establish your goals, relationships. Do you have sub goals, right? Then you want to establish your targets and how you track your targets to measure your progress. Right? And so the other thing too, when you set up your planning organization, this is where you'll see these organization types, right? How to find them, where the relationships are. You want to validate that these are good. As an example, what if HR has a planning organization for hybrid, but they also have information for an organization set up for just waterfall work? Again, these are unique. These are unique setups, unique for how you do your planning. But one most important thing I'd say is your planning item tables where all this data is held. And so you want to make sure that things are brought over, that you're seeing information, that the values are full. You see integrations where something might not be brought over, it's blank. First thing is like, okay, I brought a data, but I got a blank planning organization. Okay, then something's wrong in the integration. And here again, this is just a lot of detail for anyone who wants the kind of technical side of this on the roles, what they get, what they see, if they're, what they inherit. All right. So best practices. So again, take time to do the planning hierarchy and understand how you're going to do your planning to make sure your hierarchies are set up right. Understand who's going to be the user, right? What's your audience? Is it a narrow group to start? Is it broad? What type of planning are they going to do? Right? Make sure you know customizations. When I say customizations, what I mean by that is you probably have, every customer has attributes you created in your source records, right? Demand, project, epic. And make sure that you understand what values you want to carry over to planning. Because we'll carry over core. And you say, hey, listen, there's 3 or 4. In fact, I had one customer that had 2 very unique attributes brought over because they wanted to do the group by. I think one actually was location, I believe that was part of my demo. They wanted to do things by location. So that, again, that's not out of the box field, but they had some custom fields they wanted to bring over. Data quality too. my recommendation is to work with a small subset of data. Pick a small portfolio, a group of in your business that you can collaborate with and work with that small subset of data to see how it works. And the filtering too, like I said, the filtering, make sure that you've got the right information to do the filtering. Right, testing, right? Please don't do this in prod. It should go without saying, but sometimes we see customers try to do this in production, which is, no, don't do that. Do it in sub-dev and do it a small data set and see how it works and how the process and how the integrations work, right? Work with your planning items. Highly recommend you use a template to give you these templates out of the box to make the setup much easier, right? And make sure that as you're working through this, you understand how you're using your views, right? So lesson learned, first thing I want to mention is there's program in PPM and there's also program in APW, and it's a different construct. It's a different way to group things in APW. It's not program in PPM. Now you can bring in PPM program, but they're using their interchange. It's kind of like portfolio, same thing, right? It's a little bit different. So we'll see some, as we kind of go forward, we'll see terminology begin to shift a little bit as we roll out more of these capabilities where we're kind of repurposing a term, like portfolio is a good example. Custom fields, right? Make sure you understand these custom fields, how to map them properly and how they're carried across, right? In your execution records. The record date, I mentioned this earlier already, it's a created date. If you're using goals as a part of your existing PPM, you may have used Business Planner. If you're using goals as a migration to the new goals, because the new goals framework has an entire different table setup. So you're going to have to do a migration. Depending on how large your information set is, you may decide not to do that, just start new. And data volumes, right? Start with a small data volume. Don't bring in everything. So next steps. There's a starting kit. Someone can put in the chat there if you like, drop the link. That's the getting started. It's on community that has process guides, implementation guides, terminology, videos, capability map, briefs. It's got everything in there, a single location for you. It's got it all in there, right? Another thing I'd like to call out, if you're a customer who loves to contribute and wants to be part of the community, we really encourage you to reach out and join the evangelist. There's a way to sign up to become an evangelist for SPM. We'd love for you to do that. And there's many different types of evangelists, right? And what you do and how you contribute might be everything from just small sessions to knowledge, right? So click on take a picture of this if it's on your screen there, or it's on the deck, of course. You can join the community. So we really recommend that. And we really, by the way, really do appreciate it. It helps us out a lot. And we also get a lot of feedback from customers who join. So where's my surprise? My surprise, number 8, join the agenda. APW 5.0. I mentioned 5.0 here. It's already out technically. It came out about a couple weeks ago, early November. It does require Tokyo only. So if you're on Tokyo, you could take 4, you could take 5. So, but what is it? So 5 is introducing kind of a new way to look at how you structure your planning organizations, and they're called lenses, right? So we're adding additional capabilities in the platform, APW, around architecture, and to make it much more flexible around designing lenses. And a lens is effectively your portfolio plans, right? So you have a different way of constructing your portfolio plans, right? So 4.1 is what I covered today. 5.0 is out now. It's a major release, 5.0 being 5 versus a 4.1. So there's a lot of new capability in it, right? So you can share, as an example, in 4.1 I can't, but in 5.0, my exact view on my roadmap, I can share with somebody and they'll get that exact view, right? So there's a lot of new kind of usability features and enhancements along with some architecture changes. But as an example here, these are the out-of-the-box lenses, the 3 out-of-the-box lenses in 5.0, plus your configurable lens. So I may structure a company lens, I can do an investment strategy lens. If you're going down the product roadmap lens, product portfolio, you can use the product model, right? So we expanded the way to take the planning items and construct a visualization around them for your planning, right? So that's what 5.0 gets you, along as mentioned, some kind of cool features. So there's 5. Before we jump into questions, I want to make sure that I met my challenge with you today, which was that I've given you an understanding of the capabilities of APM, so roadmaps, backlogs, goals, tracking, that you understand what's required to deploy APW, right? So, the architecture, your roles, kind of what's needed to kind of get started. And of course, most importantly is can you communicate this to your community, to get started and get some sponsorship and some excitement.
Well, thank you, Scott. We're at the bottom of the hour here. I want to thank all our guests for coming here. And I hope all your questions were answered here today. Again, we will ensure that we have the information available on the community site. And Scott, fabulous job there today. Thank you so much for your expertise and sharing that with everyone.
Thanks everyone for attending. I really appreciate your time and patience getting through all this. It's a lot of information, and thank you again.
Okay. Again, with that, have a great day, everyone. Thank you for attending, and look forward to seeing you on future workshops that we'll be hosting. Continue to look at the SPM event sites for up and coming future events. Thank you.